And I guess that the pressure was that you never feel like it's enough. You never feel like you're doing enough or giving enough or creating enough because, in a sense we've created this opportunity for all these people, these beautiful people to work for us. And now it's been taken away and they're sort of looking to us for the next move.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. During the series, we've heard from a few operators who opened restaurants during the pandemic. There have been many who have been forced to close their businesses forever. And although it's hard to believe, there have also been some who have sold restaurants during the pandemic. Hayley Hardcastle is the co-owner of Saddles at Mount White. Hayley, how are you going?
Hello, thank you for having me. Good.
Now, Hayley, at the start of the pandemic, you had two restaurants, Saddles and Bombini at Avoca Beach. But during July, you sold Bombini. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I can. So I guess, selling a restaurant at any time is always a win. So I feel like selling a restaurant during a pandemic was I guess one up on that. And we weren't actively selling the business prior to COVID, but we did have a few people interested, and we had someone approach us sort of the start of the year, I'd say January, and we started talking, and Cameron and I thought, well, this could be our next step, and this could be for us. And I guess as we moved further into March, the conversation was getting stronger, but then also we found that it became completely silent as soon as COVID hit. So we were sort of tracking along, and somewhere during sort of April or late May, the conversation started again, and I was completely surprised that we were still talking about selling the business, and then it happened very easy. And
Wow.
it felt like a very simple process, and there wasn't a lot of motion involved, and which meant for me that it was the right time to do what we did, for sure. So and now tracking with one restaurant, and if we ever had to face it again, I guess entering it with one would be way better than two.
What was the reasons behind letting go of one of the restaurants? I know they're in very different areas and they often offer a very different proposition to the market.
Look, as I said, we weren't actively searching to sell or wanting to let go. The opportunity presented itself, and at the time, because of the weight of everything that we'd experienced with COVID, it just felt like the right thing to do, to simplify life a little bit. And we had a really great time at Bombini, and we were very lucky. It's one of the most beautiful places on the Central Coast, and it's a very sought after property. And it was just a very natural thing to do. And looking back, I wish we did a little bit sooner, because it has changed life a lot for us.
Can we have a look at the last couple of months for you? You sold a restaurant, and you just mentioned that it's changed things a lot. But what has the pandemic been like for Saddles, and also having let go of a restaurant?
Look, I think it's right at the start of the pandemic. So we'll sort of backtrack. Then we'll go right to the beginning of when it was all starting to unfold, and we weren't really sure what was happening. We were in that momentum, we're in the business, and we sort of geared ourselves up for let's do this, let's do takeaway, we're going to do menu, marketing, staffing, etc. And I think we sort of rolled with that, and we pushed it. And then about 2 days later, I thought, well, hang on, let's pull up a bit and really work out what is about to unfold here. And at that starting point, I realized that we were doing things maybe for all the wrong reasons, to sustain the momentum, and to keep the social presence, and to keep our staff employed, rather than thinking about, what the actual feasibility was, or the longevity of us after the time the pandemic coming, changing, or to the point we are now. And I feel like, at that point, and like being a business owner, we've always had to start from square one, and we've always had to build like the drive and the social presence and the demand, with little or nothing. So I believe that we could do it again. So we really just sort of sat tight then at the end of March for 2 to 3 weeks, until we knew a little bit more about, I guess, how JobKeeper would assist the reinvention of the businesses at that stage. So I think we did it a little bit different. We didn't, you know, I probably personally went a bit quiet, and I sort of switched off for a little bit while we were trying to process what the next step was. But I think rather than we were confusing a lot of my thoughts, my honest thoughts, and the things that I thought were great for the business. I was confusing those at the time with maybe the opinions of everyone around me, like my friends, my colleagues, etc., and my landlords, who were all having an opinion on what they thought would be the best option for us at the time. But it's coming out of it the other side. I realized that we are in a great place right now, and I feel like that was probably due to some of those quick thinking, or things that I did during that time, for sure.
Can you take us through some of those things that you implemented to ensure the survival of the business?
So look, at the time, it didn't feel like it was going to be the survival of business. I, those first 2 to 3 weeks of sitting tight was more about like sort of preservation, and not, we did the figures so many times on, takeaway models. And I guess somewhere like we had two different businesses in, and we had to have slightly different approaches, because Saddles is completely in the middle of nowhere, and it wasn't going to be feasible to, yeah, or it wasn't probably socially acceptable to promote people to get out and drive. So we sort of just sort of shut that one down, and we sort of collaborated our teams together. So we shut that down, and we I guess essentially we started from scratch. So we sort of picked whoever we could from both and combined them, and we opened up a little collaborative menu from both establishments outside of Bombini. We had this little shed that we sort of transformed into a little takeaway, and it was really simple. It was a tiny shed. It had a plumbed-in coffee machine, and it was pies, sausage rolls, and some sweets. And I think definitely the pies saved us. And I guess you'd see most restaurants did flip into some sort of bakery model during the time. So lucky for us, it was what we'd already known and what we already did. So it was an easy way to start, and gradually we just sort of built the cash flow from there, and started again. And it was just each week we got a little bit stronger, and then each week we built the team up a little bit more, and we sort of took 2 more people on or 4 more people on, and sort of we grew our opening like that.
You mentioned that there was all sorts of advice from everyone, sort of confusing things during that time. But what did you get right? What did you get wrong during that period?
Yeah, look, I guess I'll start on what did I get right. Well, looking back now, I feel like that I made the right decision completely about having an immediate lockdown, and stand down of the business. I feel like that it meant that we weren't investing or spending money on a takeaway trade that in you know wouldn't really be financially beneficial for us. So I feel like that was a positive. I feel like that if I had my time again, I probably I probably wouldn't you know I probably would be a better communicator, and I probably would plan a little bit better, and be a better leader as such for those around me. I spent a lot of times a lot of time on the lounge with a bottle of champagne or two, and and I guess that's what got.
Like many people.
And I look, I'm not angry about that because that's one of my favorite things to do, but I just think that I could have better spent my time in planning for future things, and I guess that's just what happens when you're very overwhelmed and you have a lot of things going on, and you're, everyone's looking to you for what is the next thing to do, and it's at that point that I probably could have structured my time or my days in those early days a little bit better, but I guess it was just survival mode, and that's what I needed to do to get through, perhaps.
What sort of pressures have you felt during this period with the obligation to bringing staff back on and running the business? You sort of just mentioned that you feel like you got on top of things a bit better, but there's a lot of things to deal with and a lot of people's salaries and wages and lives. What does that pressure felt like for you?
Yeah, I felt, you do feel all the pressure, and I think it's about the well-being of staff as well. I felt that was one of the biggest pressures, because I knew how I was feeling, and I was meant to be the one in control. So knowing, thinking about my staff and how they might be feeling, it would always send me into a spin, and I would always try to be like creating, I guess, motivational things to keep them engaged or to keep them participating in the business, even though there was no real business at that time. Um, and and I guess that the pressure was that you never feel like it's enough. You never feel like you're doing enough, or giving enough, or creating enough, because in a sense we've created this opportunity for all these people, these beautiful people, to work for us, and now it's been taken away, and they're sort of looking to us for the next move. And um, it was a lot of it was a lot to deal with, and I think that I was very lucky in that we had some of our staff were, and actually some of our staff's family were so generous with their time, and the thing about living in I guess, a small community is that we had lots of our staffs or apprentices, mums and dads, saying, "Hey, we're not working at the moment. We can come and work for free. What do you want us to do? Answer the phones, do this, do that."
Wow.
And that's it's such a beautiful thing. And we're so lucky to have a team like that, and the support of their families as well. Such a small community business, yeah.
With those pressures that you had during that time, how did it feel when in July when you let go of one of the restaurants? What sort of impact did it have on everything that you were doing?
I think immediately I had more focus. Immediately I felt a little bit lighter, and we were able to um, bring both of our teams together. And we've always been, I guess, two venues but one team anyway. But it was nice to just have one focus, and it was nice to be able to streamline my thoughts and ideas, and I guess we really needed it as well, because with the current lockdowns and restrictions on travel, we're very fortunate in regional New South Wales, because the market is so strong at the moment, and there is this huge demand, and being at Saddles, we're like I guess like the epicenter of the travel alongside the M1, and bringing both teams together was, it was sort of happened for a reason, I guess. We needed that strength to pull it all back together. So we were very fortunate.
During that early stages of the lockdown when people weren't traveling, how did you feel about owning a regional restaurant kind of in the middle of nowhere with heavily reliant on tourists?
I felt still. I mean, for me during that time, like I still felt. I felt lucky for the community that we're in, but I felt I was a bit unsure about how we were going to come back from this, and I guess the only thing I kept thinking of was, right, well, we've always been in the middle of nowhere, and we made it happen one time, and we can make it happen again when the time is right for us. And I was more probably stressed about balancing landlord expectations, uh, and and my reasoning behind not opening for takeaway, um, in the middle of nowhere, or not offering those take home boxes or whatever people were doing at the time. And I guess that was probably my biggest stress, was wanting, I guess, explaining myself and the justification of why we weren't doing it. And and not just in a business sense, but also, I was socially conscious of, posting and promoting people to come outside of their homes and travel, because that wasn't what the advice was to do. And the only way to get people to regional New South Wales is to say, hey, jump in your car and all come out together, and come for a day trip. And that is not something that we were able to talk about. So yeah, and I guess it was just about explaining, because there's pressures everywhere, and I know that, all the people, the suppliers and the landlords and everyone's in the same position, and everyone's wondering why you're not doing that, or why you are, or and and it was about balancing the expectation of, you know what staff were thinking, what I was thinking, what the landlord was thinking, what and making sure that we were all on the same page.
As you mentioned, the regions are booming at the moment, but you still have restrictions as well, and there's also the spot cases that are popping up around Sydney. What's some of the challenges in operating in those conditions?
I feel like now that, probably, let's take it back a month ago, when we just started really understanding how to manage the day to day with the new COVID policies. I feel like it was a bit challenging, and we were more, for us, and probably for a lot of restaurants, we're not really, the cleaning and the scheduling and this and that and whatever. It's normal. We're doing all these things, day in, day out. But I think we're more socially aware that, keeping being in a venue like Saddles, and that people might sort of post things on social media that might be misinterpreted, like someone's standing up or someone's doing this. So I think that puts more pressure on you than actually, we know what we're doing, and we know that we've covered all bases and we're ticking the boxes every day. But I think that's, and a lot of restaurants are probably more aware that, you know social media is such a big thing, and it's how people perceive from the outside what you're doing, rather than you knowing that you're doing the right thing. So it's more about balancing that, and the expectation of people, really, because, even though you're doing all these things, you can still get, scrutinized for, why is he wearing a fluoro jacket? You think that you could do better than that. But I thought, well, hang on, did you enjoy your food and beverage? Why am I being scrutinized on my hygiene marshal when he's doing his, but it's just those little things about, you're always going to be, there's always going to be an issue. So it's just about trying to keep keep the staff, and it is very busy at the moment, so keep the staff sort of on track and just doing the best that they can, and managing the flow of people, um, and as I said, even though we are restricted, the dining has changed, and I feel like, especially at the moment, that people are still working from home, that we're sort of bridging the gap at the moment between that midweek trade to weekend, where they're all sort of morphing into one, and becoming just like normal trade days. And I guess that's because of, the guests' behavioural changes, and working from home, and those at this stage that would be probably in Europe are still taking the time that they had off, and trying to use it as best they can. So, which is, and it's not like all stars and moons. Don't get me wrong. It's I know that at some point we need to be prepared, and that, one that anything could happen to us, and it could affect our business directly at any point in time. And two, that as soon as, let's say, borders open up, or as soon as the international travel begins again, that we might really experience some real hardship in our businesses. And I don't feel like I don't feel like right now is the normal. So we have to just prepare ourselves for. And once all the benefits start drying up, I feel like that we're going to start seeing what what the effect is really like in the industry.
You took a chance on a restaurant in the middle of nowhere and made a real success of it. But how did Saddles all start?
So we met. So Saddles is owned by John Singleton, and we met John, Cameron, and I. We worked at Bells at Kilcare, in Kilcare. We worked there for 7 years together, and that's where we met. And during that time, and John was the owner of that property, the landlord. So we were there, and then we opened Bombini, and we're sort of keeping in contact with John still. And I think it was around 2016 that he said, "Hey, I'm finally," and it's been something that John had talked about forever. "I'm finally going to open this coffee shop." And so by coffee shop, it's this little modest, little, shack sort of looking hole in the wall coffee shop. And he said, "Would you like guys be interested in doing it with us?" So it was 2016. It was a 2-year plan. We worked with the architects and designers and John to pull together the vision of what was meant to be the little coffee shop, and it turned into something. Well, it's something completely spectacular and a little bit more than a coffee shop. So, and we're very lucky for the opportunity. And and at the time, we knew that the place was special. We knew that the story was special, and we knew that we could create something, but we didn't know that it would be as popular or as successful as it is today. For sure, we didn't realize that it would be a destination venue like it is, for sure.
You mentioned your time at Bells at Kilcare, but how did you get started in the industry? What drew you to it?
I guess I've been I guess actively working since I was 14 in many jobs, but I'm the eldest of 6 kids, so I think as the eldest of 6 kids, I was always, whether I liked it or not, organizing and cooking and entertaining, and and I'm always wanted to create like a beautiful experience for my family, all my friends, and I think that it came so natural to me. And I remember being really young and like 8 years old and thinking, well, one day I'd like to create my own restaurant, and then fast forward, and I just naturally sort of started working as a 14-year-old and in cafes um, and abroad as well. And I think I found myself to be. I did try my hand at teaching at one point, and I thought, no, this is not for me. I didn't feel, you know, I didn't feel natural. And I remember, and I'm pretty lucky to find myself in a job, and then in this industry that I love. And most of the days don't really feel like work. So, um, I don't, you know, and I think that it's really important that we can try and find something like something that we do every day that we love doing. And don't get me wrong, there's been tough years. There's been a lot of success and a and a lot of failure, and working with your husband's its own challenge at times. So let's so it's yeah, as I said, it's not all roses, but I think for the most part, we're very lucky. And looking back to when COVID started, we probably were in like a bit of a stuck spot. A bit of we needed a shake up, and it was horrific. It was a shake up for sure, but I feel like that we're probably our stories more of a story of we've found some, great light and great success, and we have touch wood because it can change tomorrow, an amazing team, a collaborative team of both of our restaurants, and it's given us a little bit more time to be with them.
You're about half an hour west of Gosford and south of Glenworth Valley. What's it like putting a menu together? Is there some good local producers that you can connect with?
Yeah, definitely there is. So Cam and our head chef Ricky, they put together the menu, but our aim is to have our aim is to create a menu that was an Australian bakehouse as such, and we always try and use local or native ingredients where possible. And we have, especially recently, because we're hosting an event with the local farmers, we've started connecting with our local farmers, and it's incredible. There's so many farmers and growers, and anything from juices to veggie to beef to to eggs. Where we have more than probably anyone expects or understands. I think it's worth navigating that area, because anywhere from Pete's Ridge all the way, and I would consider like up to Yarramalong and then the Hunter, like that's our backyard. So we're pretty lucky. We're pretty lucky in that respect to our positioning for for connection with you know these businesses for sure.
You mentioned the relief and the focus that letting go of a restaurant has given you during this time. Do you see yourself owning another venue, or do you think that owning one restaurant is enough pressure?
Look, I think that that day that we sold Bombini, I was like, never again. And I think about 2 days later, I was like, okay, what's next? and it's hard to not let the imagination run wild, because I think we always have so many ideas, and especially now that the mind's a little bit freer and only has the one venue to think about. We're always talking about the next thing for us, but I said, I think I want to put all our focus into building up saddles, and there's a lot more opportunity there, and there's a lot of things we haven't done. It's almost like sold itself. So we want to sort of create some more ventures out, sort of alongside saddles. And at the moment, we are working on a few things, but I think they're more so the doomsday prep. Sort of, if this happens again, what do we pop up into, and how do we utilize all our utilize all our staff? But never say never, I guess. Never say never. Who knows?
Can you tell us some of the things on the doomsday list that you've created?
Besides making sure you've got plenty of champagne stocked up in the cellar, okay,
Number one.
that's number one. Always have champagne. So number two, we've been working with our restaurant manager and head chef into building little pop-up concepts. So and from everything from like we build, let's say it's Mexican. We build the Mexican menu. It's got 10 items. We're ready to go. We've got the branding. We've got the Instagram set up. We've got everything ready to go. So we're registering like lots of little things, and we're seeking out little spaces in I guess more populated suburban areas that we can just sort of pop into for a couple of months. And who knows, that might actually become a real concept. But at the moment, it's just sort of bred out of just what if, But I think it's fun anyway. I think it's sort of even though it's not something that's a revenue making idea at the moment, it's just things that we're doing together as a team that they're a bit exciting, and they keep the staff, I guess, engaged, and they keep us all thinking about, if another opportunity does come along, then how we're going to, I guess, work that together, and how we do work together on bringing it to life.
Has this time changed the offering at Saddles and what you may do with that in the future because of the pandemic?
Uh, yeah, for sure. I think that it's changed our there's a few things. It's probably changed our takeaway like offering for sure, made it more substantial and more, you know, it was sort of just there just because before, but now we're putting a little bit more effort into it and making sure that it is substantial enough for people to enjoy. I think that the pandemic, if you're saying offering, I think that it's structured the business a little bit different. So the offering is, and I'm not saying that I really particularly like, it's made it a bit more structured, dining times and this and that. But I mean, as far as menu, we've restricted our times a little bit just to maximize um, our staff and make it streamline it a little bit, but we haven't really changed as such the format of the way that we do things. And I guess we will a little bit when we can start doing more. At the moment small tables, and it's quick dining, and it's not favorable to special events or anything like that. But I think once we get into that point, we will implement a few new things for sure. And we have some cool things that we're working on for 2021. So I think in hope that we're on the other side of COVID.
You've had some real positives and challenges during this time. Has it changed you?
100%. It has. Yes, it has changed me. I feel like that for me, it's changed the way that I work on the business. I feel like before I was working in the business a lot, and working in the business makes it sometimes hard to do those things, the planning and the leading and the creating, and you sort of get lost in the day to day. And I feel like the one big positive is that I feel like I'm a little bit on top of it at the moment, and I can sort of be that person, moving and creating a bit of change. And I have more time for the staff, and I have more time for me. So we went for how many years we've had restaurants, we've always worked night. And at the moment where we've got this little, regional restaurant that it trades at the moment only day. And so we've been doing things that, and sort of starting new activities and hobbies outside of work that we probably wouldn't have had the opportunity, or we didn't create the opportunity for ourselves before. So I think that's been a really positive change for me personally.
There's been no doubt that the pandemic has been devastating to many in the industry, but it's also shone a light on some of the issues in the industry. Do you think there's some positives for the industry to come out of this?
Yeah, for sure. I feel that positives, um, there are, and what I already seen with my team is the positive with my team is that the appreciation for their work, or the appreciation to have a job, really, because it's not until you're without one that you understand, and it's not until you understand the workings of what it takes to run the restaurant that they have an appreciation. I think that that's number one. I feel like that the community is way more conscious of supporting local business, and I do, and they've, and you see them rally around, and really want to, you know, uh, want to support or give ideas, and I still have, some of my regulars emailing, hey, what about this? What about this? They do it a lot, and I really appreciate it, because I think that they're really invested in the business. And I guess a positive, and maybe and hopefully customer travel, like, or guest travel, may change forever, and if it does, then our local trade and our local um, guest, or or your database will continue to grow and be consistent. So I feel like that it is a huge shift, in the market. And, and I'm only speaking for regional New South Wales, and I know that there's a lot of people doing it. And a lot of my girlfriends in the city, like everyone, are doing it very tough. And I feel horrible for um, being so positive sometimes, but I can only be our experience. And I know that during the start of the pandemic, they were maybe doing better than we were. So I feel like that we can just take it for what it is right now and be really thankful that we are open and we are trading and we are busy and just and take it as long as we can and not take it for granted.
Well, I think you got onto something pretty early. A good friend of mine believes that you should always drink champagne when you have good or bad news because it'll always solve every problem.
Always.
Hayley, it's been amazing having you on Deep in the Weeds. Thank you so much for sharing your story. Keep in touch and we'll talk again soon.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. Stay tuned as we share the stories of Australia's hospo community, suppliers and producers in search of hope during this pandemic. Special thanks to executive producer Rob Locke for making this all happen. Follow us on Instagram at Deep in the Weeds Podcast or email us at podcast@deepintheweeds.com.au. Stay safe and be well.